So, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unpacking Possibility. I'm your host, Tracy Stein. As always, I'm so happy to be here with you. We have got such a great show today. You're going to learn about yoga, but in a way that's different from maybe how you've thought about it before. I'm going to introduce my two guests, and then I really want them to share their journeys and their mission and some great things that they have coming up. So, without further ado, Jordan Ashley is the founder and executive director of Souljourn Yoga Foundation, which creates transformational yoga retreats and teacher training programs to raise awareness and funds for young women's education worldwide. Jordan's a passionate advocate for human rights and ethical travel, and her work focuses on making yoga accessible and culturally adapted to serve different communities. Jordan's also a TEDx speaker, and her initiatives have been featured in Forbes, the Los Angeles Times, Marie Claire UK, Yoga Journal, and more. I know that doesn't fully encapsulate you, Jordan, but we couldn't do that in just my 30-second intro. And then also we have my good friend Joanne Silver. Now, Joanne's been on the podcast previously. Joanne is also a yoga teacher. She's got 2 decades of experience. She's certified in Reiki and reflexology as well. How great is that? Joanne teaches vinyasa yoga, prenatal, restorative, and therapeutic yoga. She's trained at Urban Zen and teaches yoga at corporations ranging from startups to Fortune 500 companies. And you have private clients as well. So Joanne has led yoga retreats to places both near and far, including Domenica, Rwanda, Peru, other domestic and international locations. And we'll talk more about that today also. But without further ado, welcome.
Yes, you. Thank you so much for having us.
So great to have you here. I've been talking about yoga and its benefits for a long time. Yoga is so popular. I feel like in Manhattan, I always make a joke like, you can't throw a rock without hitting like 500 yoga teachers. And that's a good thing.
It's true.
Not that we would do that, but you know what I'm saying.
That is correct.
That's all to say that it's so prevalent because there are so many benefits. And today I was hoping we would talk about the benefits of yoga, some of the more obvious ones, but some of the less obvious ones as well. And also talk about the foundation and the mission, what led you both to do this work and more. But the benefits of yoga, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, I think I'm going to go back a bit to my own journey with yoga to
Great.
perhaps to speak on that. Um, I started practicing yoga after having debilitating back pain. So I was in my early 20s. I had very bad sciatica. Never stretched before in my life. I was always very athletic, and I was always like out doing something active, but I just wasn't very flexible. And I went to a chiropractor, and actually, she told me I love chiropractors, but this particular chiropractor told me that I would never exercise again. And I think I was 24. She's like, "That's it, no exercise for you for the rest of your life." And I was like, "How can that be?" Because I love being active. And she gave me a couple of moves to do, which I now know were, kind of yoga moves. But it wasn't until I moved to New York, maybe 2 years after that, and found a different chiropractor who was like, "You need to stretch more. You need to go to yoga. You need to move more." Like completely the opposite, advice from this other person. So I did that, and I started practicing yoga probably 2 or 3 times a week, and I would say in the space of about 6 months, just completely changed my flexibility. Like, completely changed, and my back pain went away, and, I should knock on wood, but I've never had back pain like that, since then. Um, so one of the benefits is becoming obviously more flexible, and I have so many people and so many students who say to me they can't practice yoga because they're not flexible enough. Well, that's kind of why you should do it. I'm kind of living proof that you can actually change your flexibility. So on the physical level, there's flexibility. There's strength. You can obviously get stronger from practicing yoga. Um, there's the mental aspect, the quietening of the mind, becoming more introspective, the focus on the breath, very specific breathing exercises you can do in the yoga practice to help you to get out of your monkey mind, which I think we all tend to be too caught up in these days. Um, and then there are different styles of yoga which have different benefits. I also teach restorative yoga, which is very grounding. It's very soothing for the nervous system. It can take you out of the fight or flight response that we often tend to be in just daily life and take you into the relaxation response. Um, that's sort of the tip of the iceberg with all of them, with all the different practices. And I would say with yoga, you can practice it from any age. Like my oldest client right now is 90, she'll be 98 in May.
That's
We do
amazing.
chair yoga. Yeah, she is amazing. We do chair yoga. So you can adapt your practice throughout your whole life. Maybe when you start out when you're younger, you might be doing a lot of vinyasa yoga, a lot of jumping forward and back and handstands and headstands. And then somewhere along the way, perhaps you let go of some of that and you can keep practicing into old age. And the benefit of that is that it helps with balance. It helps to prevent falls. It helps to keep your mind and body connected. You know, a lot of people as they get older sort of lose that connection, the mind body connection, and it can really help you to stay in your body. So yeah, I am an advocate for practicing yoga throughout your whole lifespan, and even with injury, you know, you can still. I broke 2 toes last year, and I was
Oh,
still able to practice. You can modify your practice. You can, if you can't stand up, you can lie on the ground. If you can't lie on the ground, you can sit on a chair. You know, if you can't balance, you can hold on to something. So there are many ways that you can um, practice yoga and keep practicing throughout your lifetime.
yeah, I love that you said all of that because, again, I think yoga is ubiquitous now, but a lot of people probably have an idea of it being, only for the super fit or only for a certain
Mm,
age range, and that's not
mhm.
true. I think, Joanne, as an aside, I think years ago you might have sent me something where there was this little old lady, and she was probably well into her 80s, and she had kyphosis. I don't know if most people know what that is, but it's that
Yeah,
dowager's hump, and somehow was persuaded to or inspired to do yoga and was able to stand up straight. And again, at an
yes,
age when
yeah, I
we're
remember that.
when we're told that our bodies won't adapt anymore.
Right,
So
right,
it's
and they
amazing.
can absolutely adapt. You don't have to. I think part of that. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of physical stuff that happens at any age, but I think often our mindset's like, "No, we can't change," and then if you say that to yourself, you're not going to change. So, yeah, you can make big changes to your body by just by moving.
Yeah, 100%. And I appreciate your sharing your story too, because everybody has kind of a different path. Jordan, I'm curious about your path to yoga.
Yeah, so, I actually was exposed to yoga at a really young age, from my mom, and my mom was an avid practitioner, and so, I remember being maybe, like, 8 or 9 years old and, going to yoga class with her, mostly it wasn't just physical class, I remember also going to a lot of, like, bhakti and kirtans with her, and feeling so exhausted with my arms, tiring out and like, trying to hold downward facing dog or really trying to like emulate a lot of the shapes that she was doing. And, I think from doing it at a young age and then later on, I remember when I was maybe like 13, 14, years old, I hated PE. Like I was asthmatic and like not very, like, fit, and I had a lot of, self-consciousness around my physique, and, I think just at that age in general, like, when you're, a tween or, a preteen or just about, kinda coming up into those really, like, formative years, especially as a girl, like, you can feel really, kind of awkward and uncomfortable, and I remember, maybe a little bit bratty in hindsight, but I wanted to get out of PE, and I went to a school, public school in Santa Monica, and I could do independent study, and so, I would go to yoga class, and then I would get signed, off on, that I would fulfill my hours by, going and taking class by myself, and I would just go alone. And so I think from doing it at a young age and then really, around the time actually Joanne and I met when I started, university in New York, I would go to yoga a lot, sometimes even, twice a day, because it provided, such a strong foundation, especially, moving across country and being somewhere new, but it was that one constant. And I really believe that, yoga creates community. And it doesn't matter if you're doing something, different than on the mat than to the neighbor next to you, or, you're kind of are on your own journey, but it's through this communal experience or sangha, of still breathing and still moving and still being, together, under the same kind of, guidance. I think to me has always been what makes it so powerful, in terms of creating really, strong bonds, not only with yourself, but with those around you.
That's really beautifully said, and, I'm just thinking the times in your life that you've described really getting into and staying with and pursuing a deeper practice. It's also times when people tend to be so stressed, and that grounding practice, that learning how to center early on, so important. I think that's a good segue into your starting Souljourn Yoga Foundation, the communities you've created. Can you talk about that? Because it's a
Yeah.
unique take on yoga and yoga retreats, because there are a lot of them. Yours seems really different in some really important ways.
Thank you. So I think from having that kind of experience at a really young age about, yoga being really, grounding for me and it really becoming a home base, despite everything else, that comes with, being a teenage girl and all of the external stresses and pressures. And so I lived abroad, I did journalism. I lived abroad in Southeast Asia and was doing a lot of NGO coverage, and came back to New York and was doing additional teacher training hours, which is something we could definitely discuss about, like how many hours does it take to make you a yoga teacher, which is something I'm really avid about kind of decentralizing, because I really do believe everyone and anyone has the ability to teach, but that's perhaps for for another day. And, was teaching yoga in New York, and there was a lot of retreats that were happening, but there was never a give back or any kind of cultural immersion, or really none of them really seemed to have the care or the appetite to have any kind of social change, attached to it. And not to say that when we travel, we need to go and, be performative, because on the flip side of that, you then get into, the saviorship aspect to it, which is
Mm.
also something that, I think Joanne and I are hyper aware of, and in terms of making sure that we're always coming from a place of equality and not hierarchy, and not recreating power structures and dynamics. And so girls' education has always been my heart cause. I think realizing how yoga really helped me through, those early years, and then also, later on in life, being able to have education to fall back on when I was experiencing, hardship and a tumultuous period. And it really can be the gateway into opportunity and to a better quality of life. And so, what ended up happening is I was like, why don't I start my own organization? We can use, retreats, kind of the vehicle of ethical travel, as a way to support on the ground girls' education, women's empowerment initiatives, and, create community by bringing people who would never have gone to said country, never have gone to Cambodia or Morocco or Rwanda or Peru or Sri Lanka, or the other, 9 places that, we've gone to over the past, 9.5 years now, and really change the donor recipient relationship, so that it's one of connection and of learning about how one another lives. And, through including a donation, which goes directly to our partners, we're then able to see the tangible impact that, yoga can have once you get off of your mat and leave the studio, and take it to a place where, unfortunately, equal opportunities aren't available.
It's really amazing. I'm almost not even sure where to, like, which thread to take up next, because it's so important and it's so impactful. And I love that, you just very overtly mentioned it's not about going in and rescuing or attempting to don that mantle. And it's so tricky, right? Because I think a lot of times people who are well-intentioned go into different cultures and not appropriately. Um, again, despite maybe good intentions. And I love the respect and the consideration that you have woven through the planning of these retreats and the thoughtfulness of the foundation.
Thank you. And then I've learned and I've changed, and and Joanne can also speak on this too, like what was acceptable in terms of even language that's used to be able to describe these initiatives. Like it's just not appropriate anymore. Like we're always in a constant stage of evolving and changing, and you have to be present with the times. And I think even back to the first mission statement, and how that's changed, and how really it's now about supporting girls' education and women's empowerment around the world, because it's not just in the global south, it's in the north as well. We did our first retreat to Taos, New Mexico, our first ever US project last December, and that was really important. It was really important to say that we realize that this is also a homegrown issue as well that needs to be remedied and needs to be looked at and needs support.
That's really amazing. I wrote down various questions, and I'm just trying to think. Your retreats clearly are immersive. They are about cultural appreciation and exploration. I'm curious about, how the retreats unfold, how the communities respond to your efforts, and actually even how you made inroads to all these, very diverse locations and communities.
So, Joanne, do you want to take this one?
No, you go ahead.
Okay.
You're doing well.
So for me, it's always about partnership. And also, with that being said, being really responsible and respectable that this is hopefully it's a lifelong relationship, and that, we're creating this kind of transatlantic union or yoga, like, yoking together, that isn't about, oh, like this place is like the hot travel location for like, 2025. So it's really about having longevity. And with that being said, I think this was especially highlighted pre-COVID, in that it was never about me, being at the forefront of leading retreats. We would have teachers, volunteer like Joanne, and who would then bring their communities as a part of their seva to be able to go and host these retreats. And so by doing so, we're able to also make it accessible and, to people who might not necessarily be able to afford, the high end luxury yoga retreat, which unfortunately in this day and age has become, kind of the beginning of all of them. There's not really, anyways, that's a whole other conversation. But in terms of the organization, there's a lot of due diligence that comes with that, in terms of making sure that, we're in alignment with their child protective policies. Every organization is different. Even in terms of how you document your experience, there's a lot of ways that this could go wrong. So, always making sure that we're coming, it's the words you said, at it with a place of respect, and that they're aware that we're going to be present. And, we do an activity together. So another way to kind of cultivate community. So be it a yoga class, or, making a meal together, or, going to the market, or an art project. So something that people are able to share in and take part in. And then by doing so, then the participants on the retreat get to see firsthand where their donations are going to. And so that then creates, a ripple effect of being able to come back home and being able to share about their experiences, and then, having them really be ambassadors for why it's so important to be able to, travel with purpose, and to make sure that you're doing ethical volunteering and creating these, responsible partnerships. Because unfortunately, like everything in life, not all organizations have the best intentions. Even if they do, they might be spread too thin. And so it's really important to make sure that our partnerships come from a place of trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And I listened to part of your TED Talk. Congratulations, by the way. That's a lovely feather to have in your cap, and it's an important mission that you're talking about. But I remember that you were talking about how people will donate to a cause, or people will get involved somewhat, but it's harder to get people to be engaged and stay engaged. If I get this wrong, correct me, but until they really experience something on a more personal level, experience a culture and a community, see the people, like you said, see where their donations are going, but immerse themselves in somebody else's world. And I thought that was just really smart and thoughtful.
Thank you. The retreats was just the beginning of this. I mean, we've now developed our own, on the ground yoga teacher training program, which is in Rwanda and in Morocco. And the idea with that is to make, yoga accessible and um, that everybody and everybody can teach yoga. And that, from my perspective, um, you don't need to have 200 hours to be able to teach. I think for so many different demographics around the world, like that's just a pipe dream. Having the time and the resources to be able to commit that amount of time, while I think it's great, I just think for so many individuals, it becomes, unrealistic. And so really being able to make it so that these self-care practices and meditations and, pranayama and breathing, like how can we get that across to as many different people as possible so that they can then culturally adapt it and put it in their own terms and make it approachable for their communities at hand. I think that was a big tipping point for me with the retreats is that, the girls were really responsive to the yoga and they really enjoyed it. And you could even tell, after, maybe they think it was silly for a little bit, which is fine, can be awkward, but you would see, their shoulders begin to descend and the tapping into the breath. And so I think that doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost anything to breathe. It doesn't cost anything to put a hand to your heart and a hand to your belly. And so, with this and doing the retreats and raising awareness, I hope that yoga can spread so that it really can become something that is a holistic practice that, people can bring into their daily lives in any way that they see fit.
Yeah, I love that. This is gonna sound like a bit of a tangent from this, but what you were saying was making me think of something. And Joanne, I can't remember if we've spoken about this, but I think I was looking up something about yoga, something like a month, 6 weeks ago, or whatever, and somehow in my search, I came upon some sort of Reddit thread or something, and I was stunned because I did not know how many people have misconceptions about yoga being some sort of
Cult.
indoctrination, use some sort of cult or against their religious beliefs, and I just thought, "Holy Toledo." And it was person after person who said, "Oh, I used to do this and I miss it, but I realized it was evil." And I most of my listeners are not gonna be thinking that, just so you know,
Yeah.
but maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, like, I was shocked. I mean, so
There
yeah.
are, I mean, there are areas in this
Here in the United States.
in the United States where yoga is not allowed to be taught in schools. There's a whole like movement, like it's a religion. It's like it's gonna, I don't know what people think it's gonna happen to you, but it's banned in some schools in the United States. And it's a way of, first of all, it's not a religion. Yoga in itself is not an actual religion. So you're banning this way of helping children to, as Jordan was saying, be more connected to their bodies, to help them, ease their stress, to help them to manage their day-to-day lives. And yeah, yeah, there's a whole faction of people out there who do think that.
Yeah, it's just a weird aside, but I was just thinking, like, I think it's anything but that. But anyway, I don't think anybody's gonna at me in the comments anywhere about this, but one never knows. Maybe we'll
You
spark
never know.
a fruitful
You never
discussion.
know.
But with that being said, though, and I think this does translate over when you are working with different communities around the world. You do have to. I mean, you do have to be mindful in terms of how you are sharing the practice because how you might be doing it at a yoga studio in New York just might not, translate, over. And so I think it's having that kind of freedom and sensitivity to say like this is a practice for everybody, and so it's okay if we have to adapt it so that the messaging does get across and so people do feel comfortable doing it. And there's various different ways of I think you can do that while still being respectful to the lineage, because I know that's another debate that comes up as well, in that yoga has been, a lot of people will say it's been so watered down from like its Vedic roots and blah blah blah, but you know the world is just going to keep getting more and more globalized. We're going to keep getting more and more interconnected, be it through technology, our devices, through our travels, through our um our communications with one another. And so I think as long as you are, coming at it from a place of, research and, speaking to whichever organization or group and checking in and making sure that everyone feels, safe and comfortable, then I think, why not? Why not take it a step forward?
Absolutely. No, and very well said. I wanna I I would love for one of you to kind of give a mental tour of, your upcoming retreat. I know there's the one in Morocco coming up in October. I don't know if there's anything coming up before. I know you have other, I guess, hour-long or a weekend or other types of classes, but talk about that. Talk about what it's like for a participant to experience or what they will experience.
So Souljourn, well, I shouldn't say just Souljourn retreats. It's the retreats I have done with Souljourn tend to be a bit more yoga and adventure because that's sort of I like that. Um, so it's not. I would say Souljourn retreats are not your typical yoga retreat, and in a good way, in a very good way, in my opinion. Um, and I'm not dissing any other yoga retreats. I do love the yoga retreats where you go and you're lying on a beach most of the day. You practice yoga in the morning, practice yoga in the evening, and then you have some cocktails by the pool. I think that's great. Um, but the Souljourn retreats are usually more of well, obviously an immersive experience into the cultures where we travel. For the Morocco retreat, we're moving around the country a little bit. We're starting in a place just outside Marrakesh. We'll be staying in this beautiful, I say farm. It's not really a farm, but like a farm like location where we'll have the whole retreat center to ourselves. And we'll be going into Marrakesh. We're not staying actually in the city itself, but we'll be going in and doing a walking tour of the Medina. Jordan's been to Morocco. I haven't, so she can speak more to the actual experiences in Morocco. We'll be doing a walking tour of the Medina with a female guide. We try and use female guides
Great.
as much as we can. Not in all locations, but we try to as much as we can. And we will also be going on a hot air balloon ride.
Wow.
Would you like that, Tracy? I'm not sure. I'm not sure
I'm not sure. I would have to think about it, but the idea is, I mean, I've
yeah,
seen the
sunrise,
photos,
hot air
beautiful.
balloon rise, hot air balloon, sunrise, hot air balloon ride. We'll be doing that. We will obviously be visiting the organization that we're supporting, which is Association Amal, and they train women work in the culinary fields. They have a restaurant associated, attached to the organization, and they train women to work in food services as chefs. And I believe, Jordan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, they have a pretty high employment rate when they come out of when they come out of the program. Because employment, I actually wrote this down because I was looking at it before. I'm going to, if I can find this. In Morocco, women make up only 25% of the workforce. Women's labor is largely unpaid and undervalued. And this is the Association Amal, and they're working to change it. It says 300 plus women have trained with them since starting in 2013. And they have an 80% employment rate for their graduates. So we'll
Wow.
be going to visit them. We're going to do a little cooking class with them and learn about their organization. And then after Marrakesh, we're going to be going up into the mountains, into the Atlas Mountains. We'll spend 2 nights there. And a young woman, I think, who recently graduated from high school. Is that right, Jordan? I think she's fairly young. She'll be giving us a tour of her community, and we'll be meeting people in the community. And we're doing some bread making with the people in the community, and then we'll be doing a little walk through the mountains. That's about it for the actual itinerary. Is that right, Jordan? Did I miss anything on the itinerary?
At the farm we're visiting, there's a farm
Oh, I forgot
sanctuary.
about that. We're visiting animals. Tracy, could I forget about that? You would love it. We're going to
I'd be
visit
there
the
the whole
farm
time.
sanctuary.
Yeah.
You would be there the whole time.
There's bunny goats. But,
And a horse.
and horses, yeah, so, I've personally spent a lot of I mean, this will be our 6th retreat that we've done to Morocco. The first one we did was in 2017, so this is, lucky number 6. On a side note, my whole PhD dissertation is about, working with, young girls in the high Atlas Mountains and young Amazigh girls and using, yoga for empowerment and as a portal into, their lives. And so it is a place that is very near and very, dear to my heart. And I'm so excited to be, co-leading this with Joanne, and I know she'll absolutely love it. Moroccan food is one of my favorites. The food is absolutely incredible. You will not get tired of the tagine, and everything's like really fresh and really, delicious. But it really is a multi-sensory experience. Like I absolutely love going, from walking around the souks and the shops and just seeing, it's like a cinematic journey when you're there. Everything is just so stunning and so incredible. But then also too, I think by, making sure that, we're supporting, as many different local women's initiatives and entrepreneurs, from the guides to Association of Mall to the High Atlas Mountain Day. I think having that at the forefront of this then, kind of colors the rest of the experience, so that it really is about, creating, deeper connections as well. And of course, weaving in yoga and, Reiki and breath work as well, so that people really do feel like that they've had, a whole 360 experience, by the time that they're ready, to embark home.
It sounds honestly incredible. And I love that you use the descriptor like multisensory, because I really do think the things that linger with us long afterwards and really touch us so deeply are those kinds of experiences. Love it. And Joanne, I was going to ask too if you were going to incorporate Reiki and reflexology, and you are.
Yes, I will be. Probably more the Reiki than the reflexology, because it's easier to weave
Yeah,
into a yoga class. But yes, we'll definitely be doing some of that. And um, most of the yoga we'll be doing in the morning, but one day we will have some sunset yoga, which kind of changes it's different when you practice in the morning to when you practice in the evening. Your body feels different, so we'll have you know a chance to experience both of those. And I think in the evening, Reiki and restorative yoga. That's what we'll probably be doing. Um, but yeah, I love these types of retreats. I love the practicing yoga, but then you're out meeting people in the community, having these experiences. It's very sort of well-rounded experience, and it does stay with you for a long time. Like Jordan and I, we've led 2 retreats to Rwanda now, and we still keep in touch with people we met in Rwanda who I think be lifelong friends at this point.
it's amazing.
Yeah,
Really amazing. Now, I wanted to ask, I know that I'm sure innumerable people would want to go on this Morocco trip in October, but for those who may not be able to, other things that are more local or virtual that you want to talk about?
We're hosting, for anyone who's in LA, we're hosting a small event on Thursday, April 10th, in Santa Monica at Mudwater with Mad Hippie and this amazing company called BioMe. And so if anyone wants to come out, we'll have Morocco postcards. So if you're thinking about it, you'll be able to learn more about it there. But it's just like a lovely, evening of wellness. And plus you will be, coming home with really incredible goodie bags. Yeah, like a lot of water. I just went by there earlier. And so I'm really excited about that. We will probably be doing an event in New York also to raise around International Day of Yoga. So around, middle of June, like June 20th, June 21st, solstice. And so that'll be great as well. And I know Joanne has a weekend yoga retreat coming up as well.
I do. It's in August, and I'm gonna forget the date. I think it's the 10th to the 12th. Um, it's on my website. Yeah, it's a weekend, 2-day retreat in the Catskills. Or we'll be doing. It's more of a traditional yoga retreat. We'll be doing yoga in the morning, yoga in the evening, and free time hiking, going to antique stores or to the wineries. So that will be fun. August in the Hudson Valley is really lovely. So I'm looking forward
Absolutely.
to that. And then I teach, if anybody wants to practice any yoga, I teach on Zoom every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern time. And that's also on my website. It's a donation-based class. Any amount is appreciated. And that's an open level class. I have some people who who don't have much experience with yoga and people who have, many years experience. So I adapt the class to whoever is in it at any given time.
That's
So,
so
yeah,
great.
every Thursday.
So lots of opportunities for people to connect with each of you. What I will do is ask you to just each share your website. I'll put the information on that and the retreat in the show notes, of course. But if you want to let people know where they can find you both.
My website is joannesilver.com.
Okay, great.
And Souljourn's is souljournyoga.com.
Perfect. That's great. Ladies, is there anything that I did not ask or that we didn't talk about that we should cover or that you want to shout out about?
I'll say one
Yeah.
final thing. I think
Mhm.
that oftentimes we think, "Oh, I'll do it next year or I'll do it another time." And this is gonna sound maybe, like, really silly in terms of an analogy, but I feel like I do this a lot with, like, candles. Like, I'll get a really nice candle and I won't wanna use it, and I actually have one that it's been sitting on my shelf now for almost a year, and I keep saying, another time," for this opportunity for me to really enjoy this. But I think we don't know what's gonna happen next, and I think a retreat is such a wonderful way to go out of your comfort zone, especially if you're, new to travel or maybe you've never done a solo trip before. You're in a really, safe environment with, incredible like-minded people who all, have, the same intentions in terms of, wanting to do something not only for themselves, but for the world around them as well, and so I say, like, why wait? October is a great time. It's right before the holiday rush as well. So I think, taking it as an opportunity to kind of reset and set intentions for how you want, 2025 to finish up before, starting the cycle all over again, is a great way and a great kind of place to maybe, put put yourself and mindset, towards. We have payment plans available as well, like, not to sound, like, super, like, cheesy, but, like,
That's important.
Joanne and I really do believe that these experiences should be as accessible as possible, and, it's not so oftentimes I think people feel like they can't afford, and it's true, there's such a gambit in terms of how much these kinds of international travels, cost, and so, like, if anyone, wants to come, but maybe, has more questions or needs, something a little bit more individualized, like, please reach out. We're a nonprofit. Like, we're not here to gatekeep. We really do want people to feel welcome and included, to be able to join on these kinds of trips. And so, just send us a message and we'll see what we can do.
Oh, that's great.
And also, I did want to add, while you were saying that, Jordan, what I wanted to say was that these retreats, not just Morocco, really any of the retreats, you don't have to have a ton of yoga experience. Right?
Yes.
It's not the type of retreat where you're going to be doing, 4 hours of yoga a day and everyone's going to be doing handstands, and it's not that. So if you want that, this is probably not the type of retreat for you. But there's a whole range of experiences of people who come on our trip, from beginners to more experienced yogis. And there's something for everyone. But I do want people who don't have much yoga experience to feel welcome as well. In fact, sometimes people come and like don't practice as much, or they might do one day here and then sleep in the next day, and that's totally fine. Like, these trips are absolutely for you. You can do all the yoga, some of the yoga, none of the yoga. um, it's entirely up to the person who's coming. So I just did want to put that out too, that this retreat is open to anybody of any experience, even if you're a newbie to yoga.
And there's no judgment around that either. It's not like you lose,
No,
marks for, like, not coming to every single yoga.
no, no.
Just jet lagged and you wanna sleep in or you need to,
Yeah.
like, it's fine, we're here to offer, and we're here to kind of, check the temperature of the room and see, where people are at, and, Joanne and I are very, go with the flow of all of this too, and that we really want it to feel like it is a collaborative and a collective experience.
That's really wonderful. Well, Jordan Ashley, Joanne Silver, thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed having you on the show, and it sounds like an amazing retreat.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
having
Tracy.
us. Thank you.
You.
So this has been another episode of Unpacking Possibility. If you enjoyed the episode, and I know you did, please remember to like, share, follow, leave me a comment, let me know what you think. And of course, as always, until next time. Be well.